Hit her. Jimi and the Wolf podcast. Here we go.
I'm excited. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute.
We've been working too hard, man.
We have. So many things have happened.
Oh, gosh.
In this last month.
There's been a glitch in the Matrix.
There has been. And I want to talk about what we've been doing the last 2 days. Last year, I was at an event, and I'm not going to name them because I may get into legal difficulties.
We don't want that.
We don't want that. And I went to an event here in Nashville. It's a wonderful event. Tony Robbins was there, Gary Vee was there, Dean Graciosi, a bunch of great people. And it was they did some training, but they did a lot of upselling.
Yeah.
And through all of that, through an organization, I signed up for a business school. Almost said the name of it. And that was last year. And we went, it was in Orlando. Supposed to actually still going on. And because we're starting these businesses, and this was supposed to be a leveling up. There was a guy there who'd taken the courses, and he said, you got to take this, it'll change your life,
yes.
Blah, blah, blah. And so I signed up for that, paid for it, and they had one last year, and I couldn't make it because I had a scheduling conflict, but they have them periodically, and this one was scheduled in Orlando, and I asked Jimmy to go with me because we were starting a couple of businesses. And so we drive down to Orlando, and we get there, and the vibe from the very minute, what'd you think? I mean, the very time we walked up to the table.
It was anticlimactic.
Yeah, it was a lot lower key than I remembered from the previous course that I was involved in, which they upsold all these other bigger classes. Yeah. Anyway, they had to sign this single-spaced, small print, double-sided agreement that
waiver.
I made the mistake of not getting a copy of it. But was there in there about not talking anything about it? I don't remember that.
I don't know. I was convinced there was so much information on the waiver. I was convinced they were just going to start shooting at us as soon as we walked in the room, or beating us to death.
Yeah, there was a damage waiver in there, but I think there was about you can't disseminate information. So I don't want to even get close to the line. Maybe I'm on the line, but I'm not mentioning the name. And we go in there, and the first evening was. Well, first of all, I've been to a number of seminars. I just left Funnel Hacking Live, and unfortunately you weren't able to make it, ClickFunnels Funnel Hacking Live, which is about the same length as this seminar. And that is off the charts.
Life-changing.
Life-changing. Funnel Hacking Live, Russell Brunson and his company. Tony Robbins is a keynote speaker after speaker, and he is over-deliver. That's his hashtag, over-deliver. And everything was over-deliver. There was always surprises. Like you'd go in after a break and there'd be a book from the next speaker on the chair, free included. Like I showed you those little, not everything was expensive. Like this one session, they had these styrofoam things that you could flip a switch and they would glow, and they turn the lights off, everybody's waving them.
Like a rave.
Kind of like a rave, It's just all kinds of things to delight and surprise you.
Russell Brunson's legit, man. Anybody that talks as fast as Russell Brunson is telling the truth 100% of the time, because a human being can't lie that fast. There's no way. The human brain can't process information. Nobody can make stuff up that quickly. That dude not only knows what he's talking about, he's incredibly honest, because he's like...
Yeah. Tony Robbins also does business coaching. I mean, he's not just he's not a motivational speaker, and he's not my guru. He's not your guru. He did that Netflix special. He's a lifestyle coach. That's what he is.
Sure.
And speaker after speaker at Funnel Hacking Live. And Russell prohibits, you can't do any upsells. You can't use it as a platform to sell your other stuff. Except he makes an exception for Tony.
Yeah, because he's Tony Robbins.
Because he's Tony Robbins.
He's like, thanks for coming, Tony.
I mean, just the fact that Tony Robbins is there is a blessing.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Tony doesn't do a hard sell, but he's got his UPW, Unleash the Power. Unleash the Power, which I did sign up because he gave an insane discount. I think I spent like under $500, and it's normally $1,500 or something like that.
And he's a godsend, man. He's just a gifted speaker.
He's once in a generation.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be going in November to Unleash the Power, walking across the coals and all that stuff that they talk about. But anyway, so on Funnel Hacking Live was my expectations for business classes, and I go to this thing, and I mean, the guy gets up and is talking, and it felt like he put himself here, and we were fortunate to be in his presence.
When we knew most of what he was saying.
We knew everything. I learned nothing. I learned zero.
Right, I didn't.
And the last thing he had us do this exercise that was more suitable for a kindergarten exercise. Second grade level kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was disappointed.
So I'm sitting there, and I mean, it's a 10-hour drive from Nashville to go there.
Sure.
And I paid for the hotel, and I'm sitting there going, I wonder what Jimmy would think if we just drove back.
And you saw the look in my eyes when they tried to do the game. I had that pained look in my eyes. You looked at me and you were
This is like a second grade level game.
I was like, man, I'm getting ready to do this just because I know Tim's going to want me to. And you're like, do you want to go? I was like, thank God, yes. I do. I want to leave.
So we walked out and messed up their system because they had groups of five.
Right.
And,
we threw the whole thing on.
well, and one of the things, one of the small things, I mean, it was many things. Well, coronavirus, in this group, and they said we're going to take some precautions, no high fives.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. We don't want to. I mean, not that we don't think it's real, but it's over in the news. Anyway, and they had. I've been to the Funnel Hacking Live, and they always had more chairs than people. But in there, they knew how many people they had, and it was probably only 80 people. I
think so.
And they only had enough chairs for everybody that was there.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting. You're on my right, and there's a guy on my left who really should have 2 chairs.
Who really should have been in the NFL. Probably.
Humongous guy. And I'm like, it was like the cheapest budget airline you could ever imagine. Yeah, and I'm going, I'm going to be doing this for 4 days?
Yeah, right.
I mean, my word. So we drove back.
Yeah.
Drove down and the next day drove back.
And accomplished 1,000 times more here than we would have there.
Shout out to the podcasts that we listened to. We're comparing the speaker quality on the podcasts. We listened to, and the writer is Ross Golan.
Incredible podcast.
Unbelievable. The
Paul Anka episode was like a history lesson, man.
Unbelievable.
It really was unbelievable. Just seeing the progression from like the Rat Pack days and Sinatra to Michael Jackson, and he's still very current.
He wrote "My Way" for Sinatra.
Yeah,
and he talked about that.
And he's still working. He's still like working with rappers and stuff.
Yes.
And it was interesting.
Drake just cut one of his things.
It was interesting on the podcast. The guy says, when you look at your back catalog from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010, it's like how many artists can you actually say that about? When you look at your catalog from the last, 70 years.
Yeah. Paul Anka, I guess I didn't look up his age. He's got to be in his 80s, maybe
I'm not
90s,
sure.
Maybe 90s.
Well, he started so young,
Yeah, 16. No, 14.
Yeah, he had a big hit at like 16. And brilliant guy, man. Listening to him talk in the podcast.
Brilliant.
Really together, worldly, just wise man. It was fascinating to me listening to his perspective from when he was a teenager and him saying he was so self-aware at the time that he got the hit and he was like the biggest thing in the world, and him saying to himself, I have to be careful not to become like this arrogant person.
Yeah.
I have to be careful not to become a bad person. And how many 16-year-old boys
are that self-aware?
Yeah.
Especially now, the 16-year-olds are more self-aware because of the internet. I mean, the generations have changed, but in 1950s,
incredible, man. I mean, what a great human being. I mean, just listening to him talk, it was like not even a music business lesson. It was just like life lessons. He just seems like Paul Anka would be the one dude I would want to sit on a swing with and like
Oh,
have
man,
a conversation
with Paul
with,
Anka,
man.
unbelievable.
Unreal.
I'm a huge fan now.
Unreal. Yeah, me too. And I always respected his work and appreciated his art, but I just was blown away by the human being that guy is, man. I was floored by that podcast. And the DIY podcast is amazing. That was And the Writer Is.
And the Writers Is, and then Niles Rodgers.
Nile Rodgers, that one was freak off. Freak off. Interesting.
It wasn't exactly the line that originally was written.
I didn't want to say it because we promised we promised we'd keep it clean.
But Nile Rodgers was, and then telling about his dad, his parents were, he said, the drug, it's sad, but he said his parents were both had issues with drug addict, heroin primarily, and he said it was and he hung with Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk and
he's very
Nina
cavalier about it. He
Simone.
said, my parents were tight with. And
he said both of his parents, it was the heroin culture, and it was funny to hear him talk about it. He said the heroin culture, is a lot different than the meth and cocaine, where everything's super fast. And the heroin, because it's a downer, everything is slow, and it's like, hey, man, long division ain't that hard.
That's great. Those, and the Writer is amazing, and the DIY musician
CD
podcast
Baby DIY musician
is amazing. And any artist, even independent or not independent artists, should definitely be checking that stuff out because there's so much incredible information there. And that's one of the things I wanted to touch on today is that how much things have changed by way of the methods as musicians, kind of the channels that we have to learn to navigate in order to get by as musicians. There's never been a harder time, but there's never been a better time.
Yes.
Simultaneously.
It was the best of times and the worst of times.
Right, exactly. It's like now all of a sudden there's live music is as in demand or more in demand than it's ever been. It's harder to sell CDs, but you have streaming platforms and you have this incredible vehicle of the internet to where you can go directly to your fan base.
Okay, actually, Niles Rodgers talked a little bit about that, and it amplifies what I have been saying. I've heard so many, even songwriters and songwriter communities that I've been in on Facebook, who are angry at streaming and saying that, many songwriters also record their own music and may release it, artists/songwriters, even though they're primarily trying to get a pub deal. And I've heard numerous people say, I'm not putting my stuff on streaming because they don't pay enough. And, it's 80% of the revenue of the in music business right now. And it's going to get to 95%. You're going to say, okay, I'm only going to limit myself. I'm going to not be involved. And they are paying. You can make money if you. The reason Niles Rodgers said it, I think it was Niles Rodgers. We listened to so many podcasts. I think it was that episode. He said the reason why folks didn't think that streaming was really bad was because contracts with artists specifically would say, okay, you get whatever percent, like 18%, 14%, 12% of all the CD sales, whatever it would be, and then you get your pub if you're a songwriter. And streaming was a new technology, and when it came on, it wasn't explicitly listed that the label would have to pay the artist, and so a lot of labels just didn't pay the artist or the songwriter because it wasn't in the contract, because it was like, if, for example, we have new technology where songs are electronically beamed into our head and we hear them that way, and that technology, I'm just making something stupid, Jetsons random up, and that technology is new to be developed and it's not explicitly written into an existing artist contract, the revenue that comes from that stream doesn't have to be paid to the artist, and so the label is not going to pay the artist if they can get away with it. And so I think it wasn't it Niles Rodgers that said,
Nile Rodgers said
that's
that,
why it got the reputation. Artists said, oh, you can't make any money from streaming. And it had to do with the contract. It didn't have to do with that streaming wasn't paying.
Well, I mean, it's also the first time that artists are getting their music to millions of people. And not just, there are nearly untapped markets all over the world. The market in Brazil has become huge. Eventually, China's going to open up. There's, now it's the first time ever you could write a song in Nashville and not leave your house and get it to any corner of the globe, and millions of streams, and people have done it.
And on top of that, it's a legacy thing.
Yes.
Mariah Carey went to the top of the charts with a 25-year-old song, All I Want for Christmas Is You, last Christmas season. Mm-hmm. That's unheard of. If that was a CD-only era, that wouldn't happen.
It would never happen. And that's the thing that these artists that are pushing against streaming aren't looking at, is that, just because you have a back catalog doesn't mean that you can't re-release that entire back catalog on streaming, and it's direct to. There's in another 10 years or in another 15 years, the people that will be making it in the music business will be the people that are focusing 100% of their energy online.
Yeah.
And there's...
Who just recently said that? Billy
Corgan. Billy Corgan said that. And it's the equivalent of saying, in the 20s, I don't like cars. I ride horses. It's already happened, and so I think it's important now for artists to kind of get those tools in their toolbox. Is writing great songs still important? Sure, but equally as important is having an online presence, having your music on streaming, having a Facebook presence, having an Instagram presence, finding your market
finding your tribe,
exactly. Because, and I'd like to ask you this on the podcast, because I know you know the answer. What is the average wage for an artist that has a record deal?
Average annual income for an artist that has a record deal is $10,000 a year.
$10,000. So these people that are saying, well, there's no money in streaming. Okay, well, how much money were you making before?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just an unwillingness to change, and it's as simple as that. They're not looking at the overall big picture, that now you have freedom. You have freedom to be your own record label, to be your own distribution, to be your own marketing, and there's lots of great tools in place to help us do that. It's really not that hard, and I've been learning a lot about it with you. You've taught me so much about it in the last year, and if somebody like me can do it, I was the very last generation. I'm 42 years old. I was the absolute last generation, the last year almost, that you could make it all the way through high school without ever touching a computer. And I never once touched a computer in school. I remember they offered a keyboarding class, and I thought, it's the dumbest thing in the world. When am I ever going to touch a keyboard? I'm not going to need that. And then 10 years later, computers took over the world, and I still hunt and peck. I still type like that, But if I can learn these things, then anybody can learn these things. And I think there's an unwillingness, which is advantageous to younger musicians and younger artists, because there's an unwillingness with musicians my age and older to go with that unstoppable tide, which is technology. Because I know tons of, and it's an important point to drive home to artists that are listening to the podcast, that there are far too many artists, songwriters, performers sitting at home and kind of bitter, in a sense, under the false pretense that I'm very talented and that's going to take me wherever I need to go, because there's an illusion that you're very talented, you write great songs. So a record label's going to hear you, and they're going to walk up and say, hey, we're going to handle all of this stuff for you, and we're going to make you a star. All you have to do is perform. All you have to do is write great songs and perform. That's an illusion. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen to anybody. In fact, it really never did. I mean, all of the older acts, if you look at the Beatles, they were working themselves to death. Michael Jackson worked himself to death. All those big artists, they worked themselves to death, building their own identities and their own brand. And I think it's important for musicians to kind of get real about the whole thing and decide, you know, you have to dig in and kind of become you incorporated if you want any chance of making it in the music business, because there's more opportunity for people to make it now than there's ever been before. And now it's really the first time that artists can look at it and say, well, what is making it?
Yeah, that's the first question. What is success?
Yeah, what is making it?
Artist?
What is success? You know, I have people in my hometown ask me all the time. They say, you know, think you'll ever be successful? Or you think you'll ever make it? You think you'll ever make it in music? And I'll always say, you know, kind of jokingly, I was like, well, I hope so. I hope one day, hopefully. And, you know, man, I've been playing music for a living for 20 years. I have couple houses, beautiful wife, 3 beautiful children. I pick my kids up from school every day, write songs, come to Nashville. You know, I have a lot of freedom. And, you know, and that's what making it is to me, is getting to be dad as much as possible while my children are young, and having creative freedom and making enough money to pay the bills. That's making it.
Yeah, your own definition.
Right. It used to be making it, well, you got to be on MTV or you got to be on the radio. And I think a lot of artists have to get real about what is that definition of making it, and don't let anybody else tell you what that definition is, because it could be many, many things. It's like the lady that you showed me is brilliant, Dawn Byer.
Yeah, Dawn Byer.
Brilliant. Yeah. She's making, you know, a great income.
Yeah. Supposedly 6 figures is what.
6 figures, doing Facebook Live from her house. You know, she came to Nashville and she beat up Broadway and got tired of blowing her voice out and doing 4-hour shows with no break and having to play 100 songs or having to play the same song over and over and over for tip money. And eventually she just started doing Facebook Live stuff with a tip jar, and now she's making bank. She's great living. Do you think she feels like a failure?
Absolutely not.
You know, there's probably people in her hometown going, oh, yeah, well, you know, she'll never make it, while she's making it.
Someone said that musician is the only industry where people, and I've been asked, do you think, am I going to see you on, name the show, am I going to see you on America's Got Talent anytime soon? Or am I going to see you on American Idol anytime soon? You know, is it the only industry where people don't think you're making it unless, I mean, it'd be like going to your local restaurant and saying, am I going to see you on Top Chef? Any, you know, very successful, the most successful restaurant in your town that ever, the line's out, you can't get in, and they're very successful. But you go in and say, are you ever going to make it? Are you ever going to be in Top Chef or whatever TV show it would be? Because
they have their own preconceived notion of what making it is. And the interesting thing about the music business is maybe it's the only business where you can be really, really famous and not be able to pay the bills.
That's true, too. That's true.
You know, what is making it? How many of those people won American Idol and disappeared? How many of those people won America's Got Talent and disappeared and didn't have careers that sustained because they didn't have, you know, all their spokes weren't the same size?
That you get American Idol, and there have been so many people, you know, even in you don't have to be win, but you're in the top 5. Now, of course, there's the Kelly Clarksons and the Carrie Underwoods and the Adam Lamperts that have gone on. I mean, I read one day that Adam Lampert makes over $10 million a year singing for Queen. Isn't it Queen? He's the lead singer for Queen. And that was a partial year. He's probably making 15, 20 million.
Great for him, man.
Yeah.
But for every one of him.
For every one of him, there's hundreds of
thousands that auditioned, you know, that were great in their town, but they were relying on that false pretense that somebody was going to show up and say, hey, you're really good. Here's a bunch of money. You don't have to work hard anymore.
I'm trying to think of some of the names. Rudy, one of the guys, the trying to think of some of the names. I wasn't a huge fan. I mean, we could come up with a bunch of names of people, and where are they now? I mean, they're out of the business, basically.
Sure, exactly.
Because they don't, and as was explained, one of the podcast shows we're talking about this, they don't write, they perform covers, and they're told what to sing, and it's a challenge to them. I mean, there was a guy that I played in his backing band for a very short while from Iowa, and he was on The Voice, and they teamed him up. He only made it a few episodes, but they teamed him up and had him sing a song. He was a country guy, and they had him sing a song that was way out of his comfort zone.
Sure.
It's a challenge. It's a stretch. Can you do something that's out of your normal range? Yeah. That's their goal. They try to throw you off to see if you do you have the range? And that's the opposite of building an artist persona, where you build an image.
Build your own brand.
Build your own brand.
Yeah.
And those people don't have their own brand. They have an American Idol brand.
Sure.
Or a Voice brand.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I think we can't stress that enough to other artists, especially younger artists, is that you really are you incorporated. You decide what that brand is, and that if you're doing it in a way that's not honest or not legit to yourself, everybody sees through that, and that doesn't last. Lots of people have had a great life just sustaining in the music business because they keep it real with themselves. And you're better off, I believe, and it's been my life experience, you're better off to have your true blue fans that really believe in your stuff, that are going to buy every album and every piece of merch that you make, than to try to have that one big hit that makes everybody happy, because it's never going to happen. You're better off, like you said, your tribe. You find your tribe and the people that believe in what you're doing. And it's surprising because you don't need 1 million people to do that.
No.
You need...
Well, there was that famous article a few years back, Give Me 1,000 Superfans. And
1,000 superfans.
And they spend an average of $100 a year on my stuff. That's $100,000 a year.
Exactly,
And that's only 1,000 fans.
Yeah, I made a good living for a long time in a town of 13,000 people. People go, how'd you do that? Well, because 10% of them really like my stuff, and I know them, and it's moving to that place now, which is really beneficial, not just for the artists long term, but it's more beneficial for the fans too, because they feel like they're a part of it. When they know that they're helping keep you afloat. And I know the crowdfunding thing has changed, but there's something about Facebook Live to me above and beyond YouTube, because it's a concert, man. It's a concert from your house.
Now, I do want to go back and maybe give a slightly different, or maybe not correct, but to 100% online, but that's to build my perspective.
Sure.
You may have a different viewpoint, but my perspective would be to build your fan base, to build your following. Do that online. It's how are you finding your fan base? I mean, the old school way is you go out and you tour your butt off, and you meet those fans one by one, and you go one to one. But Chris Greenwood, Manifest, talked about it. Billy Corgan's talking about it, trying to promote your music.
Yeah, and there's still people doing that.
But what the point I want to make is that doesn't mean you don't ever do live. Live is alive and well. The gross revenue of the live business has doubled in the last 10 years.
Right.
There's a lot of money in playing live. It's as strong as ever.
Sure.
But at least the way I would position it, based on everything I've read and learned and studied, that's not how you try to build your fan base.
It's not how you get up and going.
Not how, yeah.
Unless you want to buy your way onto a tour or something like that.
Yeah, buy your way on a tour.
I mean, you can work really, 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 really hard and book a show and hang 1 million flyers and beat the streets and show up and spend money to book the room and pay your band and have nobody there starting off. And there's, and that's
very disheartening.
It is very disheartening, and that's the thing, because a lot of people get discouraged from that and just give up. I've seen lots of talented artists just give up because they had, a bad night or perfect storm. I booked a CD release one year in my hometown, and I was very proud of the album. It was Songs from Mr. Bradford. I recorded it in Nashville at Sony. I was very proud of the songs. I was proud of the recording. I was played well on it. And, we hung up all these flyers, and we put the little hand cards on people's windshields, like 1,000 of them, and I was beating it up, had radio ads. It was in my hometown. I was just absolutely certain this thing was going to sell out. I had not a doubt in my mind it was going to sell out. I'm thinking I'm going to move at least 300 CDs, and I was kind of counting on it financially because I had just paid for the albums, duplication and whatnot. And when I booked the show, I didn't realize I booked it on Black Friday. The day after Thanksgiving. So we have the show, and there's like 50 people there.
What was the capacity of the room?
350. And I had sold it out the year prior. Sold it out
on Black Friday.
And moved all the CDs.
But not on Black Friday.
Not on Black Friday. And Black Friday was a terrible night to have it because everybody's shopping day after Thanksgiving.
Or exhausted from shopping.
Right. And I just booked it and put it on my calendar and didn't even think about it. Just wrote like November, whatever it is. And yeah, that'll be great. New CD, everybody's going to love it. And I ended up selling a lot of them, but it took way longer than I thought because it was an oversight on my behalf. And that's something, when you're booking shows, one of the things that you don't really read much about, but is very important depending on where you're at geographically. I know they just canceled the NCAA tournament, but the part of the country that I live in, southern Indiana, I live in Madison, so I play a lot in Louisville. A lot in the, Cincinnati, Indianapolis. Everybody lives for college basketball in that part of the country. They lose their freaking minds over it because you have University of Kentucky, Indiana University, Purdue, University of Cincinnati, University of Louisville, Notre Dame's right up the road. There's all these, traditionally great college teams. And as a working musician, you got to be careful. You actually have to look at a lot of that stuff and know
But you don't schedule when the
who's playing when, because if you book a venue in Louisville, Kentucky, I don't care who you are or how good you are. If the University of Louisville is playing the University of Kentucky and you walk in and try to start playing music, somebody's going to throw something at you. So there's all these little variables in being an indie artist and booking shows like that always factor in, man, Foresight.
I would think, though, that actually you have more experience than I do, but I would think that booking shows between Thanksgiving and Christmas could be a little tricky.
Sure.
Because, you got on one side, people are in a festive mood. They want to go out. They're in a mood of celebrating. People are just in a happy holiday mood. On the other side, you got holiday parties. Right. You got other commitments that might, so it could be tricky. It could be a huge win. Now, obviously, New Year's Eve is probably the best.
Yeah.
Every band is playing on New Year's Eve.
What's always been, a real blessing for me is that time of year. There's always corporate parties.
Yeah, well,
that's where the corporate
best.
time is. Christmas parties, because a lot of them, they don't want to have their party the week before Christmas. A lot of them have it early. I've played company Christmas parties the end of November and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a balance, But you almost have to anymore. Unless you're just touring, it is doable to kind of plant your roots now and say, I'm going to be an independent musician and I'm going to have a normal life. And that's the whole, that's the long and short of it. The point I was trying to get to is now that's attainable. Whereas before it was never attainable. And because of the internet, now you can absolutely.
I got your angle, yeah.
You can dig your heels in and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to play music for a living and I'm going to sell my own my own art, and I'm still going to be a family-oriented person, and I'm going to have a normal life and health insurance and the whole bit, you know. Whereas before, artists never had that. Now it's attainable. But it's, you know I'm kind of beating it to death, but I just feel like I meet a lot of musicians, very talented musicians, that will ask for tips on these kind of things, you know, like how can you make a living playing music, or it's my dream. And I meet many of them that are this far away, they just won't take that leap. And then they'll say, what could I do to be playing music for a living? And what's interesting is sometimes you ask them, well, what do you do now? And they work a job and they don't make very much money and they hate their job. And you say, well, how long does it take you to do your job? Well, I work 50 hours a week. Well, you know, if you could do 50 hours worth of gigs in a week and focus on Facebook Live and YouTube, what's the ceiling as opposed to your job? But many of them won't take that leap of faith. And it's still not taken seriously by a lot of people.
Well, Gary Vee would say, you know, if you have a 40-hour work week, you get off work at 5 and you get home from work at 5:30 or 6. What do you do until you go to bed? You know, if you're really serious about pursuing a career, whatever it would be, or a side hustle, or whatever it is, you know, are you sitting on the couch and watching Netflix?
Right.
You know,
or are you grinding, trying to get somewhere better?
Because while you have your job, working to get out of your job.
Sure.
Sometimes easier said than done because you come home from work and you're exhausted and getting into that mode, you know, but, we probably got a lot of material here.
I think so.
And maybe we'll call it till next time.
Sounds good. Until next time.
All right. Jimmy D and the Wolf.
Jimmy D and the Wolf.
See you next time.